So I thought I would show you quickly how to use DESMOS, and you can always come back to this video if you ever would like a refresher. So the first thing you're going to do is look for DESMOS, and it should come up in your browser since we've used it so much. And I'm going to show you how to create one using a blank graph. So we have our blank graph here. And the very first thing that you're going to notice are the fact that there are these symbols here that look pretty familiar, which is the plus sign, and over here is the tool sign. That's going to be the one that we use the most when we're creating our graphs in DESMOS. So the very first thing I'm going to show you is how to add things to your graph so you can create it how you would like it. So you'll see that it has a function, f of x, so that's where you would put in your equations, notes, data tables, and folders. The very first thing you're going to do is start with your table. So right here, like you just saw, I hit the plus sign and then I selected table, and it automatically created an X and Y T-chart. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in some numbers just as an example. And you would be putting your data points that you collected in your lab. So if we're just doing a simple graph, let's just keep it nice and simple, and we can create our linear pattern. So we've created our data table, and we see that the points automatically put it into the graph. Looking at this pattern, we should know what the equation is automatically. And since this is a linear or proportional pattern, we know that the equation is going to be y equals x. And when you start to type that, you'll start to see that it says add slider with the a value. You're going to go ahead and click that, and that's going to give you your line of best fit. Now, of course, depending on the data that you have from your lab, the equation may change to fit the pattern. So once you have your A value, you have your sliding bar that's going to change the slope of your line. If you look over here, that's going to be your range. So depending on how big your range is, you may or may not want to have it set differently. And then depending on how big the data is, your steps are going to be dependent on that as well. And the steps is how much the dial changes the line when you're moving it up and down. So let's just say that it moves one step at a time. So this will move it exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5 in terms of our slope. And then if you want to make it so that it's more, you have more control over it, you can always create it to be 0.1, and then you have more control in regards to how steep your slope is. So that is the general way to create a graph with your line of best fit. But in order to create all of the proper axes, what we'll need to do is go over here where we have our toolbar. So over here, you'll see when you click it, it's going to give you some options. So you're going to want to keep it to grid. You can include arrows that kind of just puts the points to indicate that it is never ending, that it keeps on going, and you can decide whether or not you want to have the minor grid lines, which just make it more specific or not, which I recommend doing just so you can use that graph when you're making your predictions. In regards to our X and Y axis, we have that right here. If you would like to create a label for your X axis, this is the place where you would do it. So let's pretend this was number of steps, and our Y is going to be distance. So thinking about our walk lab. So that's where you're going to see where you can label it. So if you click out, you'll see that there your X and Y axes are now labeled. If you would like to center the graph more, since our plots are only in this first quadrant, what you can do is go back to the toolbox, and then you can adjust your ranges. So you can set this to be 0, your X. It'll start as 0 over here. And then since our data points only go up to 5, we can make it more specific and have our table go to 5. And we can do the same thing with our Y value. So that way we can just kind of make it more specific to what we are graphing. So now you can see that our entire graph has been kind of zoomed into this one area, and then you can further dictate what your steps are going to be. So if you want it to go up by 1, you can put in that, and that will kind of help you dictate what the scaling is going to be like on your graph. That is in general how we are going to add in or create our graph from scratch using DESMOS. And then for this situation, we're just going to not worry about the uncertainty boxes whenever there's a lab where you have to graph using the uncertainty boxes. If you're making a prediction and using confidence in that prediction, then we will provide that for you because it is just too complicated, and that's not something you need to worry about. So I would recommend taking this video and practicing on it yourself, getting familiar with the site, with the A-bar, how to dictate that, and then you can use this for future labs. All right, if you have any questions, you can always refer back to this or ask me if you have anything else you'd like to go over.